Shalom, shalom, chavrim. I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and we were actually trying, guys, to put this over on Danun Institute. For some reason, I'm still kind of like stuck in a situation where I cannot get the live broadcast to load up on Danun Institute. So to keep from having to keep delaying everything, I decided to jump back over here to Israeli News Live and just go ahead and do this little short Shabbat message here on Israeli News Live. I do have a news broadcast. We're going to go live here later this evening in about an hour after this broadcast here, maybe a little bit less. Kind of catching up on the things that have gone on. We just had a weird situation here today. I'm talking about like 9 hours of no internet from the moment I got up this morning all the way up until just moments ago. We have been shut down, a regional shutdown on internet. I thought it was a little bit odd, but especially for such a long duration of time. Not to say that it's first time it's ever happened, but it's first time it's ever happened to me in a situation like this, especially that long. Anyway, we're trying to get some things adjusted here. Give me 1 second, guys. This light is so bright off to the side that we have here. We've been trying to adjust lighting in here and still have not fully got everything just right, and so it's just a little bit of a burden still yet. Try to get too bright one side, too bright the other side, and then you can't see the screen, etc. This was a question that was asked me a while back, and in fact, a good friend of mine, Sister Jennifer, had called me recently and shared with me that God had given her some insights on the book of Numbers and how that it actually represents Christ and his bride. And I thought it was very interesting what my sister shared with me, but I was actually asked when I was doing the equality messages from different biblical aspects, Paul's teachings, etc. And then one sister wrote me and asked me about the book of Numbers. And when a woman vows a vow, if she does it in her father's house, he can disallow the vow, or her husband could disallow the vow. And I was asked, would I weigh in on this subject here? How does that apply when we're looking at biblical equality? We look at it just simply, it starts off, Moses spoke unto the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, this is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath and to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. If a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord, and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she hath bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth, and not any of her vows or her bonds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her, because her father disallowed her. Notice that. He forgives her, right? And if she had at all an husband when she vowed or uttered out of her lips wherewith she bound her soul, and her husband heard it, and held his peace at her in the day that he heard it, then her vow shall stand, and her bonds wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her husband disallowed her on the day that he heard it, then he shall make her vow which she vowed. I thought that was interesting. And that which she uttered with her lips, wherewith she bound her soul, of none effect, and the Lord shall forgive her. And that's the part that Sister Jennifer spoke about, seemed like to her like taking the place of Christ there. It would be Christ there. But let's just look at this from face value. But every vow of a widow and of her that is divorced wherewith that have bound their souls shall stand against her. Now that's actually over her or upon her. In other words, she must keep the vow regardless. But in the case of a father or a husband, they have the power to disallow the vow. And it almost makes it sound like that the husband has the authority over the woman. Well, see, God knew that you were going in a patriarchal society. And this is why Moses gave this command. Because if you go back to Genesis, this is kind of a short teaching here, guys, but just something I felt like it was warranted and very much needed. If we go back to Genesis, though, and we see what happens in Genesis, we find out that when the fall came, all right, it's actually Genesis chapter 3. Okay, after the serpent has beguiled the woman and the fall is coming, and God says to Adam, what have you done? And he says, the woman you gave me, she's the one that did it. See, some people say that Adam was like Christ. No, Adam was not like Christ, because if Adam was like Christ, he wouldn't have blamed his wife. He would have taken her sins upon himself, but instead Adam did just the opposite. He blamed his wife and said, the woman you gave me, she's the one that did it. That's not very Christ-like, okay? But anyway, we know that he blames her, and then God goes to her, and she says that the serpent beguiles her, and of course we read about all this. We read about how that the tree was one to make one wise, how she was tempted by it, etc. But both of them actually sinned. Now, when the sin is over, and God is come to deal with this, and of course he curses the serpent for what he does, and then we get to the part to the woman, and the Lord said unto the serpent, you know, we see that the curse is in verse 14. He says, but he says here, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and they shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise their heel. Actually, it's his, not their. That is Mamre trying to make it a plural when it's not. It isn't a singular. And to the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy pain and thy travail. In pain thou shalt bring forth children. And it's actually a little different than that. It's the pain is of sorrow, of heart is what it is. All right, and he says, you shall not just bring forth children, but you would birth sons, teladai banim, as we see plainly right there in the scripture there. And thy desire, and they translate this, thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Ve'el ishach tushotecha, actually he says to her, and you will turn to your husband, and he, vehu imashal becha, and he shall rule over you. Now, this was not a divine ordinance of God. This was as a result of the fall and the fact that he was bigger and stronger than what she is. And so as a result of the fall, it's right here in a Hebrew word, for those of you that do not know, shuk, right here, tashuktecha, all right? The word shu comes from the word shuv, which means to return, all right? And you, the tav, being the you shall turn techa, to your, of course right here, starting here because it's kind of backwards in Hebrew, ve'el, to your what? Ishach, your husband. All right, and that's exactly what happened. So God knew that she would turn to him, and as a result of that, that's why we see the situation in Numbers where when a father or a husband disallows her vows, God forgives her of her vow. Why? Because he's still exercising rulership over her, which he really has no place to do, but he does it anyway, because she has turned to him, and so therefore she's kind of put herself in that position too by subjecting herself to him. But a woman doesn't have to be subjected to her husband. But God knew that this would happen, and God knew that the man would rule over the woman, so therefore God made a provision for the woman if she makes a vow and is unable to keep it as a result of this type of relationship and this type of system that would be in place until the coming of Christ, practically, where the revelation of the place and the perfect will of God, that they were equal, would finally be revealed. And of course, since that time, it's all over again. It's put every woman back into subjection once again because the church wouldn't have it. They made sure the women stayed bound and suppressed. But this is the reason why you see, and I think the key of it here is that, and the Lord shall forgive her. Why? She makes a vow. She wants to keep the vow. But this husband and this father both tell her she can't keep it. You know? And in the case of the husband, he puts it upon the husband. Now, all right, then you do the vow. You're going to rob her of the vow that she makes, then you do it. I think that's interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, Just a quick note for those of you that are listening right now, of course, Dunoon Institute, if you want to support the ministry, that's not what I'm actually looking for. I thought I had the one up about the conference here. And let me just see real quick. I know it's on here. Here we go, right here. There we go. Just a reminder for those of you that are wanting to attend the conference in Orlando, Florida, August the 4th, 2018 from 6 to 10 p.m. It's a one-day one afternoon conference only at Embassy Suites Orlando North, Ultimate Springs, Florida. And the phone number for the hotel is 407-834-2400. That's only if you're planning on staying at the hotel or if you need directions how to get there. They can direct you. It's right off of Interstate 4 in Orlando, and I think that is exit number 92, if I remember right. Exit 92 on Interstate 4. That would be south of the interstate as well, if that's considered south. I don't know if they consider that east or west, but I guess if it would be considered east or west, it'd be east, southeast side of the interstate there, right off of Interstate 4. Hope to see you there. That is going to be a very in-depth conference there. Going to be really speaking about coming out and sharing with you guys the things that I used to do for our country here, and some very sinister things that the government does and that goes on in this world there. I have spoke with some authorities already in regards to major cases that have never been solved in this country, and I do have meetings coming up to speak about that, to weigh in on these issues here that might help bring some reconciliation to families that have lost loved ones courtesy of some of the people that have been in power in the government there. You'd be surprised, friends, just how crooked political figures are. You'd be surprised about the people that they run with and the things that go on, and the drug smuggling, the trafficking, and everything else you could ever possibly imagine that happens in this government. And I tell you, I can't speak for everyone, and I don't claim to, but you'll find out if you happen to be there in Orlando. I'm Steve Benoon. You're watching Israeli News Live for our Shabbat message, short, hopefully, but a blessing to many of you. We'll be talking to you guys a little bit here on the news on Israeli News Live. Erev Tov, and let me just say good evening to all of you that are watching over there that may not be back for anything else. Trust everything's a blessing to you, sisters over there, brothers as well. And I have gotten several emails, and that was something I forgot to put up. If you're coming to the meeting, let me just, and I'll post it right here in the chat real quick for you. I need to hear from you that you're coming. Make sure you post in your email, Orlando Conference. I have, thus far, everyone that I'm aware of that has emailed about the conference, I've already emailed you back to let you know that you have been added to the list. We still have plenty of room, but that changes rapidly because more and more people are signing up to be there. If you have more than yourself coming, and I'm coming, but you have several people coming and you didn't write that in there, I've got to know that. We are limited on the number of people that we can seat there. And I know 3 weeks is not very much time, but you'll be surprised how fast 3 weeks can fill up depending on who's coming from this area. So please definitely do let us know. And again, just so you can see it, the location, Embassy Suites Orlando North. They have multiple conference rooms there. We reserved one that seats 100 people. And I've noticed before, if I do like a 24-hour notice on a 25 person type room, it'll book out in 24 hours with no problem. So I'm thinking in 3 weeks, we'll probably book out on 100 people. I could be surprised, may not be. You never know. It all depends. I know it's an awkward time for people too, with kids going back to school, etc. But anyway, definitely keep us in your prayers. And also, if you want to support the ministry, the work we do here, you can do so by our mailing address, Dunoon Institute at Champions Gate there, or you can do that via our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org. Anyway, let's get ready for news here in just a little bit. I'll be back to speak with you guys momentarily. Shalom, shalom, in a world of Ein Shalom. There is no peace.